I was in my 4th month of deployment in Syria when my younger sister sold our mother's house. She didn't call me. Didn't text. Didn't even hesitate. The house was in my name, left to me by our mother before I enlisted. I found out through a vague alert from my bank about a wire transfer deposit with my name on it. At first, I thought it was some mistake. Then I saw the attached note, partial disbursement from property sale. My chest went cold. I clicked the link. The title company had finalized the closing 2 weeks prior. The deed transfer had gone through without my signature and the name on the seller's line? Danielle T. Burke. My sister. Same blood. Same girl who used to braid my hair and cry when I left for boot camp. Now signing off on a house she didn't own. I was 6,000 miles away, sitting in desert camouflage, hands trembling over a screen lit with betrayal. Though I didn't cry. That came later. After the numbness. After the call to the base legal officer. After I double-checked the deed, the will, and the power of attorney my mother had given me, not Danielle. What hit first was the weight of silence. Like being dropped in a well and hearing the lid close. Our mother had died 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She was gone in 6 weeks. Her final wish had been clear: I want you to keep the house. You're the one who served, who sacrificed. Danielle was there when she said it. Danielle smiled, nodded, and then she waited until I was deployed to sell the only thing I had left of my mother, the house I grew up in. The one with the red shutters, the lilac bush in the backyard, and the dent in the banister I made the night I snuck out to meet my prom date. Gone. I remember calling Danielle. It was 2:34 a.m. her time. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. Calm. Cold. I know what you did. We'll talk when I get back. She texted the next day like nothing had happened. Hey, sis. Hope you're safe. Can't wait to see you. I didn't reply. I spent the next 3 months finishing my tour with steel in my spine. Every time I ran drills or patched up another bloodied comrade, I thought of her signature on that deed. She had forged it, and I would prove it. That there's something people don't understand about betrayal when it comes from someone who used to sit next to you at the dinner table. The cut is surgical. Quiet. But it never really clots. I went over every angle while I was gone. How could she have accessed the title? Who helped her? Did she have a contact in real estate? How did the notary sign off? And most of all, why? The answer came in one of her Instagram stories. I saw it when I got back stateside, 4 a.m., jet-lagged, scrolling in the dark. She was at a spa retreat. Champagne in hand. Hashtag self-care queen. The caption read, "Sometimes you just gotta sell the past to fund your future." Whatevs. Peace. She sold my inheritance to fund her lifestyle. She didn't just steal the house. She turned it into a vacation package. A new car. A down payment on her fiancé's business.it was all there, posted in real time for the world to see. As if nothing could touch her. As if I were too far away to ever come back and claim what was mine. But I did come back, and what she didn't realize, what none of them realized, is that I'd spent the last 4 years learning how to fight for more than just my country. Now I was going to fight for myself. The first thing I did when I got home was drive by the house. It wasn't mine anymore, technically. But I needed to see it with my own eyes. Proof that this wasn't some nightmare playing on loop in my head. The lilac bush was gone. The shutters had been repainted white. And a for rent sign was staked into the lawn. That hit harder than I expected. She hadn't just sold the house, that she'd turned it into income. Passive money. Monthly rent checks. From the only place I'd ever felt safe in. I didn't knock. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in my car across the street for 20 minutes and let the numbness soak in. Then I drove to the courthouse. I requested a copy of the deed transfer. The woman behind the glass window asked if I was the buyer. No. I said, "I'm the real owner." She blinked. Then printed the paperwork anyway. I read every line like I was scanning a target, slow, methodical, surgical. Danielle's name was scribbled across the seller's signature line, but the notary block was what stopped me. Signed, stamped, and notarized in King County, Washington. I was stationed in Texas. Hadn't stepped foot in King County in months that she'd forged my name. Then found someone to notarize the document as if I had signed it in person. Illegal. Fraudulent. And the best piece of leverage I could have asked for, I made 3 copies of the deed and highlighted the signature and notary line in all of them. Then I called an old contact, Marcus Ellis. Real estate attorney. Ex-Army. We'd crossed paths during a veterans housing initiative. He owed me a favor. Danielle sold the house, I told him. Used a forged signature. Notary fraud. I want it undone. Silence. Then, how long ago? 3 months. Do you have the will? Yes. And power of attorney. All in my name. Meet me at my office Monday morning. I hung up, and for the first time since that wire alert overseas, I let myself feel something close to hope, but hope is fragile when you've been burned, because when I got home that night, another surprise was waiting. My father. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. Not since he accused me of abandoning the family to play soldier, while Danielle stayed behind to take care of things. He was sitting on my front porch like nothing had happened. Golf hat, cargo shorts, and a smug expression that made my skin crawl. I heard you're back, he said, standing up slow. We need to talk. I didn't invite him in. He didn't ask. She needed the money, he said, voice low. You wouldn't understand. You were always off somewhere, doing your own thing. She committed fraud, I said. He snorted. She took care of your mother while you were deployed. Paid the medical bills, drove her to chemo. That's a lie. I paid every bill. And Mom hired a nurse when Danielle bailed 3 weeks in. His jaw tightened. You're not going to tear this family apart over a house. That was when I realized he was in on it, not directly. He hadn't signed the papers. But he'd known. Maybe even encouraged it. And now he was here to put out the fire before it spread to the public record. I stepped closer, slow. You should leave, Dad. You're making a mistake. No. I made the mistake of thinking loyalty meant something in this family. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Then he turned and walked away without another word. I watched him go, heart pounding, the last pieces falling into place. The IT wasn't just Danielle, the IT was all of them. They'd waited until I was halfway around the world, then carved up my mother's legacy like it was leftover turkey. Because in their eyes, I was expendable. Just a uniform. A name on a plaque. Someone who served but didn't belong. But I was home now, and I was done being the silent one. That weekend, I gathered every piece of documentation, my mother's will, the notarized forgery, Danielle's social posts, the wire transfer logs. Even the spa receipt she'd posted online, evidence, cold. Legal. Admissible. By Monday morning, I walked into Marcus's office with a military duffel full of truth. He didn't say anything when I laid the papers out. Just studied them in silence. Then finally nodded. This isn't just a civil case, he said. This is criminal. Good, I replied. Then let's go to war. There's something eerie about waiting for justice to start moving. You expect it to roar, like a helicopter lifting off, blades slicing through the air. But instead, it creeps. Quiet. Paper thin. A signature here. A timestamp there, and in that silence, the weight builds. Marcus filed the first petition within 48 hours, a motion to reverse the property transfer on grounds of fraud, forgery, and lack of owner consent. We submitted the deed copies, the notary record, my mother's will, and a sworn affidavit with my deployment timeline. The motion froze the house's rental income temporarily. Danielle wouldn't be cashing another check from my mother's house anytime soon. Then we filed a formal complaint with the Notary Commission, a move Marcus called the opening punch. If that notary had signed off on a forged document without me physically present, she'd be disbarred. But paperwork, even powerful paperwork, moves slowly, which meant I had time to think. Too much time, and thinking is dangerous when the past starts whispering again. The week before my mother passed, she called me into her room. Her voice was small, brittle like autumn leaves. Don't trust too easily, Elle, she'd said, resting her hand over mine. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Only behavior does. I nodded, thinking she was delirious from the meds, but now her words echoed louder than ever. I replayed conversations in my head. The ones where Danielle acted like she didn't care about the house, too much upkeep, she'd said. You're the one attached to it, not me. I remembered the day of the funeral, how she'd left early to go help her boyfriend's catering gig, and how my father told me not to make a scene about it. Back then, I told myself it wasn't worth fighting over, but that was before they'd ripped up my mother's wishes and sold the memories out from under me. I stopped checking social media. I deleted Danielle's number. I put my uniform in storage and shaved my hair short, not a dramatic buzz, just enough to feel like I was shedding a skin. I needed clarity, not sentiment, and clarity came in the form of a knock at my door. It was Marcus. He didn't call first. Just showed up, briefcase in hand. We have a problem, he said. Inside, he laid down a folder. Inside were photos, screenshots from the buyer's agent. A couple had already moved into the house. They'd signed a rental contract with a third-party property manager, who, according to our investigation, had been set up by Danielle's fiancé 3 weeks after the sale. A shell company. The lease was signed under the LLC name, Burke Legacy Holdings. I felt a cold smile creep across my face. She really thought this was airtight. She's laundering the rent through her fiancé's business, I said, nodding. So the money doesn't look like hers on paper. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. But that also means if we can prove collusion, we can drag the fiancé and the LLC into the fraud suit. It was a gift. One she didn't realize she'd wrapped in her own arrogance. She's going to lie, I said flatly. Tell the judge I gave verbal consent. That it was all agreed upon before I left. She can try. But you've got a better witness. I raised an eyebrow. Your deployment commander, he said. Already signed a statement verifying your location during the signing. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet, I just felt ready. The next move was the cease and desist letter, served directly to Danielle's condo. Not emailed. Not mailed. Hand-delivered by a process server. It was the first shot across the BOW. No more silence, no more pretending this could be handled over coffee and apologies. That night, she finally called. Blocked number. I answered. Eliza. Jesus. What are you doing? Her voice was high-pitched. Tense. Like someone trying to sound calm while the ground crumbles beneath them. You'll find out soon enough, I replied. Tell your fiancé to lawyer up. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was Mom's house. We were supposed to share it. No. Mom left it to me. You sold it while I was deployed. And you're going to pay for every square foot. She tried to keep talking, but I ended the call not because I was angry, because I was done offering her chances. The next day, Marcus filed to subpoena Danielle's phone records and text logs from the time of the sale. If there were any conversations between her and the notary, any messages that hinted at what she did, we'd have them. That we weren't just going to win, that we were going to bury her story with the truth. A week after the subpoena filing, Danielle went dark and no more calls. No more texts. Her social media vanished. Instagram, deactivated. Facebook, wiped clean. Even her fiancé's company website redirected to a dead page. Guilty people run when they sense the chase has begun, but I wasn't chasing, I was building the cage. Marcus and I filed for a temporary restraining order against her accessing any funds related to the house, including rental income or asset transfers from the shell company. It wasn't just about cutting off her cash flow. It was about sending a message. I see everything. Meanwhile, I got a call from a woman named Linda. She and her husband were the current tenants living in my mother's house. She'd found my contact info through the county records. I was still listed as the legal owner pending the fraud case. I'm sorry to bother you, she said hesitantly, but we got a weird notice from the bank. Something about a legal freeze on the property? I met her for coffee that afternoon. She was kind, mid-40s, teacher, single mom of 2. She showed me her lease agreement. The property manager listed was Everstone Property Group, a name I recognized from the LLC tied to Danielle's fiancé. They told us the house belonged to their investment group, she said. That it had been inherited by a family member who wanted out. I showed her the original deed. My mother's will. The cease and desist, her face fell. I'm so sorry, she whispered. If I'd known, I shook my head. You're not the one who needs to apologize. She offered to vacate early. Said she'd break the lease if it helped me. But I told her to stay, for now. Her family didn't deserve to be displaced because mine had no soul, and besides, their presence in that house? It was evidence now. More names. More contracts. More people who could testify. Danielle had turned my mother's house into a lie, brick by brick. But every lie left a footprint. I was collecting every single one up that night. I visited my mother's grave. First time in months I brought lilacs, the kind she used to cut from the backyard bush, the one Danielle had torn out post-sale. I'm sorry I wasn't here, I whispered. But I'm here now. I stood in silence for a while. Long enough to feel something sharp inside me go still. Like a blade cooling after the final forge, this wasn't just revenge, this was repair. 2 days later, Marcus called with the records. Danielle had exchanged 47 text messages with the notary in the week leading up to the sale. Most were short. Unremarkable, but one stood out and sent at 2:11 p.m. the day before closing. He's in Syria. Just stamp it. I'll handle the rest. She'd referred to me as he, a petty insult. She always hated that I wore the uniform, cut my hair short, spoke in precision. Said I was trying to be a man. But her mockery would be her downfall. We now had proof of intent of forgery. Fraud. Collusion. Marcus was already drafting the next motion, a civil suit with criminal referrals attached. He'd also pulled Danielle's financials and traced large deposits from the property sale to her fiancé's accounts, and from there, into a new condo under her name. They were laundering my inheritance into their lifestyle, but they'd made one mistake. They thought I'd never come back, that I'd never fight, and even if I did, that I wouldn't know how. But war makes you quiet, precise, ruthless, and the courtroom? That was my battlefield now. Marcus filed to have the condo frozen as part of a broader asset seizure. We also filed a motion to reverse the house sale entirely, citing fraud at every level: forged deed, notary misconduct, shell company collusion, misrepresentation to the buyers. That we weren't just dismantling her lie, that we were making it court record. The judge set a hearing date, and that night, Danielle finally broke. She emailed me, "Please, let's talk. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Can we meet? Just you and me, no apology and no accountability, just fear." I didn't respond. Instead, I sent her message to Marcus, let her fear grow roots, let her wonder what silence really feels like when it's not passive, but strategic. The next move was mine, and I wasn't rushing it. The morning of the preliminary hearing, I wore a black suit and my dog tags tucked beneath the collar, not for drama. For memory, this wasn't just a case. It was a reclamation. Marcus had warned me, she's going to play innocent. Expect waterworks. Expect the I didn't know routine. I didn't care that we walked into the courthouse together, both of us calm, silent. It wasn't about noise anymore. It was about control. Danielle was already seated, her fiancé beside her. He looked like every smooth-talking finance bro I'd ever seen, and slick hair, sharp suit, confidence hollow enough to shatter with a tap. She looked thinner than I remembered. But not weaker. No, she still carried herself like a woman who thought she could spin the world if she smiled hard enough. She avoided my eyes. The judge entered. First came the review of evidence, the deed, the forged signature, the notary's text messages, the wire transfers. Danielle's lawyer argued that she'd believed she had shared ownership, that she acted in good faith, and was misinformed about the property's legal standing. Marcus stood, calm as ever. "Your Honor, the defendant sent this message, he's in Syria." Just stamp it. I'll handle the rest. That is not good faith. That is calculated fraud. The courtroom went still. Danielle's lawyer asked for a recess. It was denied. The judge spoke directly to her. "Miss Burke, did you sign this deed in your sister's name?" Her voice shook. I thought I had the right, that wasn't the question. She paused. Swallowed, yes. And there it was, not a bombshell, a whisper. But powerful enough to reset the air in the room. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to, this wasn't about theatrics. This was about exposure. The judge ordered a temporary injunction on all income from the house, pending final judgment. The tenants could remain, but Danielle and her fiancé were barred from collecting rent. Marcus leaned toward me. It's happening. She's unraveling. We exited the courtroom, papers in hand outside. Danielle caught up to me. Eliza, please. Can we just talk? I stopped. Turned slowly, she looked wrecked. Makeup running, mouth trembling, her eyes still scanning for sympathy she hadn't earned. I just wanted a piece of something. You got everything after Mom died. I almost laughed. I got the bills. The grief. The end-of-life paperwork. You got to pretend it never happened. That's not fair, she snapped. You sold the house I was supposed to come home to. And you forged my name to do it. Fair doesn't belong in your mouth. She looked like she wanted to argue. Instead, she said, what do you want? There it was, the real question, not apology. Not remorse, just cost. I stepped in close, voice low. I want my house back. I want the world to know exactly what you did, and I want you to feel it. Not just in court. In every room you walk into after this. She went quiet, then tried one last time. You think you're better than me? I didn't answer, because the question wasn't worth answering. I walked away that night. I sat alone in my apartment, rereading the court's temporary injunction. It felt like the first breath after nearly drowning, but this wasn't over. We still had the formal fraud suit. The potential criminal referrals. The financial tracing. This was just the crack in the dam, and behind it was everything she thought she could bury. Marcus called. She's scared. Her lawyer wants to negotiate a settlement. I looked at the ceiling. Good. Let her offer. You want to settle? No. I want to see what she thinks my silence costs. Danielle had always underestimated me because I didn't scream, but what she didn't understand is that some people don't shout when they're angry, they sharpen knives, and I was just getting started. 3 days after the hearing, Marcus called with the details of their settlement proposal. Danielle was offering $120,000 to walk away. Her lawyer said that no admission of wrongdoing. No reversal of the deed. Just money. Enough, they assumed, to shut me up. I almost laughed. That house was worth over $500,000. But more than that, it wasn't for sale. It was memory. Identity. My mother's legacy. And Danielle thought she could toss me hush money like I was a bartender. She stiffed on a tip. Marcus waited on the line, patient. Well? He asked. I want to send her something, I said. Not a counteroffer. A message. I'm listening. I dictated a letter. One sentence only. You can't buy silence from someone you already tried to erase. We sent it that night. Attached to the rejection notice. By morning, her lawyer had filed a motion to delay the fraud suit, citing ongoing negotiations. It was a weak move. A stall tactic. So I filed something else. A formal complaint to the state attorney general's office. Forgery, notary fraud, real estate misconduct. I copied every document, every text, every notarized lie, and then I sent copies to the Notary Commission, the Real Estate Licensing Board, and the IRS, just in case her fiancé had failed to report the property income correctly. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was procedural. Danielle and her fiancé had created a paper empire built on my stolen name. Now I was feeding that paper into the right shredders, one legal authority at a time, and it worked. 2 weeks later, Marcus walked into my apartment with the smirk of a man who just watched someone light their own house on fire. You're going to want to see this. He said that he opened his laptop and played a clip from a local news segment. A fraudulent property transfer involving forged documents and a disputed family inheritance has sparked a broader investigation into real estate shell companies across the county. There was Danielle's fiancé, caught outside his office, shoving past a reporter. Is it true you knowingly facilitated the sale of a property under false pretenses? He didn't answer, just ran. Danielle's name wasn't mentioned yet. But it would be. Public court records were only a week away from being searchable. Marcus closed the laptop. She's going to come crawling soon. I didn't want her to. Crawled, I wanted her to sit in what she'd built, long enough to realize the smell of rot was coming from inside. That weekend, I got an email from an old friend, Jordan, from the VA Community Center. He said he saw Danielle crying in the hallway outside the law firm downtown, said she looked wrecked, but still acting like the victim. She asked me if you were serious about pressing charges, he wrote. I told her, Eliza doesn't bluff. I stared at that last line, and I realized something. For most of my life, I had played the role they assigned me, the strong one, the quiet one. The sister who never made demands or threw fits. I served. I adapted. I didn't complain. That made me easy to steal from. Until now, I booked a meeting with Marcus. I want to file for full ownership reinstatement, I said. Not just reversal. I want the title cleaned. Scrubbed. Everything tied to her gone. He nodded. And what about criminal charges? All of them. The state was already reviewing our referral. The notary was under investigation. And her fiancé's finances were being audited. That we were closing in, but before we filed, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I walked the perimeter of the house. The lilac bush was gone, yes. But the roots were still there. Sprouting. Back, just like me, I stood under the front archway, looked up at the roofline. Memories rushed in, not loud, not cinematic. Just still moments. My mom's voice calling me in for dinner. The creak of the screen door. The smell of cinnamon in December. I would reclaim all of it, not for sentiment, for justice. 2 weeks after the news segment aired, Marcus forwarded me an email from the Notary Commission. The woman who notarized the forged deed had confessed. In her statement, she claimed Danielle pressured her, said it was just paperwork, that she didn't realize it was a forgery. But that last part? That was a lie too, because attached to her confession were screenshots Danielle hadn't deleted, messages where she said he's not even in the country. Just do it. I'll owe you one. That was it. The final nail. The commission suspended the notary's license immediately and recommended prosecution. Her name would now be linked to fraud in every real estate and legal database, and that meant every deal she'd notarized in the last year was under review. Collateral damage. Danielle's circle was shrinking. By the end of the week, Marcus had filed the title reinstatement motion, requesting the court erase Danielle's name entirely from the house history and restore mine as sole rightful owner, retroactive to the day my mother died. We requested damages, too. Not just the $120,000 from the house sale, but additional penalties, emotional distress, legal fees, and restitution for the rental income she and her fiancé collected. Marcus called it a precision kill. He wasn't wrong, but there was still more to do. I booked an appointment with the Department of Veterans Affairs. I wanted documentation verifying my deployment dates, my command structure, and the mental stress this betrayal had caused, not just for court, but for my own records. The VA therapist asked if I had family support. I smiled. I used to. Then they sold it. She didn't press further. That same afternoon, I got a letter in the mail that had no return address. Inside was a handwritten note on floral stationery. Danielle's handwriting. Eliza, I didn't think you'd come after me like this. I didn't think it would matter this much to you. I guess I never really knew you. Maybe that's why I did it. I'm sorry. Not because I got caught. Because I lost you. I read it twice, then I fed it through my shredder, line by line. Sorry doesn't stitch torn contracts, it doesn't regrow lilac bushes, and it doesn't bring back a mother's last wish. The next day, Marcus's paralegal called the court. Date for the full fraud trial was set. 3 weeks out, but Danielle's lawyer was panicking. They'd submitted a motion for mediation, a last-ditch attempt to settle before trial. Marcus gave me the choice. If you want to end this now, we can negotiate terms. Full restitution, public apology, whatever you want. But if we go to court, we go for the throat. I didn't hesitate. Throat. He smiled. She won't recover from this. You know that, right? She shouldn't. I meant it, because this wasn't vengeance. It was alignment, putting reality back where it belonged. The night before our next court filing, I went for a walk. The air was cold. Clean. I passed the street where I'd scraped my knee riding bikes with Danielle when we were 10. Back then, she'd run to get a Band-Aid. Hugged me. Called me a warrior. That memory used to sting, now it just floated. She hadn't changed. She'd revealed that that's what betrayal really is. A mirror turned slowly, until it reflects the version they were always hiding. And I reached my apartment and paused at the door. A sense of finality moved through me, not closure, not healing, but readiness. Tomorrow, we'd finish filing the full fraud charges, and then I would walk into court one last time, not as the quiet sister, not as the soldier in the background, but as the legal weapon they never saw coming. 3 days before the trial, Danielle's lawyer called Marcus again. This time, it wasn't a stall. It was panicked. They'd seen the updated court docket. The notary's confession was being admitted as evidence. The shell company's bank records had been subpoenaed, and the state attorney's office was officially observing the proceedings for criminal referral potential. A translation. Prison was on the table now. They wanted to talk. We're prepared to offer the full $500,000 value of the home, her lawyer said, plus an additional $50,000 in emotional damages, if she agrees to settle today. I didn't blink. No deal, I told Marcus. I don't want a payoff. I want a ruling. He relayed the message word for word. By noon, the news hit the local paper's legal section. Decorated Army veteran rejects six-figure settlement in property fraud case involving forged inheritance. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I wasn't even trying to make noise, but sometimes, silence becomes so loud it echoes. That night, my father called. It had been months since the last time when he tried to defend Danielle on my porch. Now, he sounded older, worn out. She's your sister, he said. You're destroying her. I let the words hang between us for a beat. No, I said. She did that herself. I'm just turning on the lights. He exhaled. You've always been so damn cold. No. I just finally stopped apologizing for your mistakes. Click. I didn't wait for his reply. There's a special kind of power in choosing not to explain yourself to people who never asked what it cost you in the first place, and I was done spending my breath on them. The day of the trial, I wore the same suit, same dog tags beneath the collar. Court was packed, reporters, interns, law students. The buzz of curiosity and drama. But I didn't feel nervous, I felt precise. Danielle entered with her fiancé and 2 lawyers. Her expression was blank, but her posture screamed desperation. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge entered. We began. Marcus opened strong. Laid out the sequence and my military deployment at the time of the deed transfer, the notary's misconduct and confession, the text messages confirming forgery, the shell company laundering the rental income, the false lease and misrepresentation to tenants, the financial transfers into Danielle's personal condo. It was surgical, and then Danielle took the stand. Her voice was small. I didn't think she'd come back so soon, she said, staring at her hands. I thought she didn't care. She left. The judge cut in and left? Or served overseas? Danielle fumbled. She always made me feel like I didn't matter, she said finally. I just wanted something that was mine. And that justified forgery? Marcus asked, cool and low as silence, and there it was. I in that moment, every excuse she'd ever made dissolved under the weight of fact. The court recessed at noon, a verdict due in the morning. Outside, reporters asked if I had a comment. I shook my head. Let the documents speak, let the silence convict. That night, I walked the city. Past the diner where my mom used to meet me on Sunday mornings. Past the courthouse steps where I'd taken my oath years ago, and then I went home and slept the best I had in months, because win or lose, the truth was out, and no one, not Danielle, not my father, not her slippery fiancé, could unwrite it. The courtroom was silent when the judge re-entered. Danielle wouldn't look up. Her fiancé had stopped whispering legal jargon into her ear. Even the gallery, so full of noise the day before, seemed to hold its breath. The judge adjusted his glasses, then began, in the matter of Burke versus Burke, regarding fraudulent transfer of inherited property, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Eliza Burke. Not a gasp, just stillness. Then the judge continued, voice firm, measured, cutting through the quiet like a scalpel. The court hereby nullifies the previous property transfer dated May 18. Ownership of the residence located at 241 Brookline Drive shall be restored to Eliza Burke, retroactively, effective the date of her mother's passing. Furthermore, due to the presentation of compelling evidence, specifically a notarized document obtained through proven forgery, the court awards the plaintiff restitution in the amount of $172,000, equal to misappropriated rental income, and financial damages. A criminal referral will be sent to the state attorney's office for consideration of charges related to forgery, fraud, and unlawful enrichment. It was over. Danielle's mouth fell open. Her fiancé whispered something. She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the floor, as if by looking down she could undo everything above it. I stood calm. Quiet, the dog tags at my collar pressed light against my skin, like a reminder, this is who you are, not what they called you, not what they stole from you. The bailiff called for order. The judge adjourned. Danielle didn't move, she just sat there, her shoulders drawn in like a cage. Trapped in the truth she thought she'd buried under my silence. Marcus leaned toward me as we exited. You could take the money and disappear, he said. Buy something bigger. Build new. I shook my head. I'm not running. I'm going home. We left through the back. No press. No quotes, just clean air and long steps outside. The sky was the kind of blue that only follows a storm. Crisp. Sharp. Unapologetic. By that evening, the story had gone viral. Not just on legal blogs, but on military forums, women's rights groups, veterans newsletters. They called it, the sister who fought back. I didn't ask for that title, but I didn't run from it either. Danielle sent one last message through her lawyer. She wanted to talk. Privately, I said no, that door didn't exist anymore. Instead, I called Linda, the tenant living in the house. I wanted you to hear it from me, I said. The title's clear. You're safe to stay until your lease ends. No tricks. No corporate middlemen. Just a fair deal from the person who actually owns it. She cried, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. She whispered, I'm not, I said quietly. Not anymore. Because now I understood what my mother meant in her final days. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Only behavior does. And Danielle's behavior, it had finally met its consequence. A week after the verdict, I drove to the house, not in a hurry. Not in fury, just quiet intention. Linda and her kids had moved out the day before. Not because I asked, because she said, you deserve to walk into it fresh. I brought nothing with me but a single box, a framed photo of my mother, the original deed in my name, and the key that had once been mine. The front steps creaked the same way they used to. I stood at the door for a moment, breathing in the warm August air, letting my fingers rest on the chipped paint of the frame. Danielle had repainted it, but under the white gloss I could still see the flecks of red from my mother's era. I unlocked the door. The smell hit me first, that strange mix of stale furniture polish and lavender-scented air freshener. Not mine. Not Mom's. Something artificial, like a staged memory. I walked through the hallway, trailing my fingers along the wall. This was where Mom used to hang her quilt calendar. This was where Danielle and I painted flowers in 3rd grade, and Mom didn't yell. Even though the paint bled onto the wood, now it was scrubbed down. Sanitized. It didn't matter, the bones of the house were still ours. I walked into the kitchen and opened every cabinet. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to reclaim the space in the smallest, most human way possible. Drawer by drawer. Memory by memory. Then I reached the window overlooking the backyard. The lilac bush was gone, but I could still see the patch of soil where it had stood. That's where I'd plant a new one. From a cutting. Something strong, something that would root again. Later that day, Marcus sent the final paperwork, official title deed, damages wired, case closed. I framed the new deed and placed it beside the photo of my mother in the hallway. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like alignment. The house was never just property. It was a promise. Danielle tried to sell it like it was a handbag, a quick asset to flip. A piece of my past to pawn for spa days and clout. But what she didn't understand, what people like her never understand, is that some homes aren't built with bricks. They're built with sacrifices, with hospital visits, with holding hands through morphine dreams, with final breaths whispered against hollow cheeks, and no deed forgery can erase that. The next day, I changed the locks, not because I thought Danielle would come back. Because I wouldn't let her in again. Not even in metaphor. That evening, I had my first real sleep in months. No messages, no court prep, just stillness. I dreamt of my mother, sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee from her chipped mug. She didn't speak. Just looked at me and smiled. When I woke up, I knew what I had to do next. The fraud case was over, but my voice? It was just getting started. I reached out to a veteran advocacy group, one that focused on women in uniform and post-deployment legal trauma. They asked if I wanted to share my story. I said yes, not for sympathy, but for someone like me, sitting in a barracks or a car or a lawyer's office, wondering if fighting back is worth it. It is, even when it's slow, even when it's quiet, even when the people who hurt you once held your hand, because justice isn't about rage, but it's about precision. It's about choosing to rise without letting them pull you into the mud. They made point 6 weeks after the verdict. I received a letter from the state attorney's office. Criminal charges were being formally pursued: forgery, wire fraud, notary misconduct, real estate fraud. They weren't charging Danielle yet, but she'd been named as a primary subject under active investigation. The notary? Already indicted. Her fiancé? Under audit, both personally and through his LLC. It was happening, not out of spite, but because when someone weaponizes your silence, the most dangerous thing you can do is speak with proof. Marcus called that afternoon. He sounded more satisfied than I'd ever heard him. They're going to flip her, he said. Danielle's the weakest link. The fiancé will throw her under the bus to save himself. I didn't care how the dominoes fell, I just cared that they fell. Later that evening, I sat on the back porch of the house, my house, with a glass of water and a single photo in my lap. It was from my mother's last birthday. She was thin, her eyes tired, but smiling wide. I was in uniform. Danielle stood next to her, beaming. The irony cut deep. 2 daughters, only one left standing when it counted. I tucked the photo back into the box and stared out across the yard. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Danielle, but to myself. You kept your promise. You defended her name. You didn't become what they tried to make you. You're not just a soldier. You're a woman who returned from war and waged one more, and won it, without firing a shot. I sealed the letter and placed it in the top drawer of the hallway table. A future keepsake. A reminder that rage isn't power, clarity is. A week later, I was invited to speak at a legal symposium for women veterans. I almost declined, but something told me to show up. I wore a navy suit. Minimal makeup. The kind of presence that didn't beg attention, but demanded it anyway. When it was my turn, I stood at the podium, looked out at the faces of other women who'd fought battles no one saw, and said, I'm not here to talk about revenge. I'm here to talk about ownership. A pause. Of land. Of name. Of truth. The room was still. Listening, I told them everything, not for pity, but precision, and when I finished, they stood, not clapping wildly. Not cheering, just standing, like witnesses. Later, one woman came up to me, tears in her eyes. My sister did something similar, she whispered. I thought I had to forgive her to move on. You don't, I said. Then what do I do? Document. Confront. Defend. She nodded, and I realized something I hadn't until that moment. What Danielle tried to steal wasn't just my inheritance. It was my right to speak without apology. My right to not be the good sister, my right to be the one who didn't let it slide. 2 months passed. Danielle hadn't been formally charged yet, but her fiancé had flipped. We knew it from the paperwork. His LLC dissolved. His assets frozen. A written statement submitted to the court in exchange for leniency. He threw her under faster than I expected. In his deposition, he detailed it all, how Danielle came up with the plan, how she found the notary, how they funneled the rental money through his shell company to avoid taxes. It was meticulous, coordinated, and deeply, stupidly arrogant. Marcus called the moment he read it. She's done, he said. We're looking at a full criminal case within the next 90 days. I didn't smile, I just nodded, because by then, I was no longer watching the war unfold. I was rebuilding what it tried to destroy. The house had become my anchor. Each week, I chose one small project to complete: repainting the shutters, fixing the creak in the stairs, planting the new lilac bush. I wasn't trying to restore what was, I was proving that I could decide what came next. One morning, I found a box in the attic labeled E.B. It was mine, old letters, school awards. A dog-eared notebook filled with poems I'd written during my first deployment. My mother had kept them. Protected them. Even when I wasn't around to claim them, the bottom was a note in her handwriting for Eliza. Because she always comes home stronger than she left. I sat on the attic floor for a long time with that letter. The thing about grief is it never really ends. It shape-shifts. And sometimes, it waits until you've finally reclaimed your space before it returns, not to haunt, but to remind. That night, I lit a candle on the front porch, not in mourning, in memory, in acknowledgement of every step it took to walk back into this house with my name intact. Danielle had tried to turn this place into a transaction, but I turned it back into a boundary, not just against her, against every version of myself who once felt like silence was the safest choice. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even cold. I was clarified, and clarity, that's what justice looks like when the noise is gone. 2 days later, Marcus called. She's being indicted. Charges include real estate fraud, falsification of legal documents, and conspiracy. He paused. You did it, Eliza. I didn't say anything right away. I just looked out the kitchen window, toward the baby lilac pushing through the dirt. I know. Then I hung up. I opened my mother's old recipe box and pulled out her handwriting. She had left instructions for everything: casseroles, cookies, even a handwritten list of what flowers to plant in which season. I wasn't trying to be nostalgic. I was trying to live in a house I owned, with a name they couldn't sell, and a story they couldn't twist anymore. The day Danielle was indicted, she didn't call, but her lawyer did. A voicemail, marked urgent. Ms. Burke, this is regarding your sister Danielle. She's open to entering a plea if you're willing to provide a character reference on her behalf. Please call back. I played it twice, then deleted it, because if there's one thing abusers always count on, it's your willingness to appear merciful when the spotlight turns on them. But I had no interest in softening her fall, and not because I wanted her to suffer, because I wanted her to own what she did, completely. Publicly. Without the insulation of family ties to cushion the landing. That same week, I received an envelope from the district attorney's office. Inside were transcripts of the recorded deposition from her fiancé. He hadn't just thrown her under the bus. He'd flattened her with it. He told them she'd planned it for months. That she'd waited until my deployment schedule was confirmed. That she'd used an old version of my signature she found on a birthday card to forge the deed. That she'd laughed. He even gave them a spreadsheet. She had tracked every dollar. Not a mistake. Not a misunderstanding. A spreadsheet. Marcus reviewed it line by line and said, this is premeditation. She might serve time. But I didn't feel triumphant, just settled, because this wasn't about prison. It was about exposure, about the mirror cracking wide enough for her to finally see what she'd become, not the golden child, not the overlooked sibling, but a fraud who mistook manipulation for power. I got an email the next morning, from an account I didn't recognize, just one line. Was it worth it? Ruining the only family you had left? No signature, but I didn't need one. It was my father, still clinging to the belief that protecting an image was more valuable than protecting a legacy. I didn't reply, because when people choose to stand next to betrayal, they deserve the same silence they gave you while it was happening. Instead, I forwarded the email to Marcus, for the file. Let them all live on paper, where the facts don't bend and the tears don't buy forgiveness. That Friday, I hosted a small gathering at the house, just a few friends, veterans, neighbors. A woman from the legal clinic who'd helped prep the notary complaint. That we lit candles on the porch, laughed in the kitchen, walked barefoot across the newly stained deck. It wasn't a celebration. It was a declaration. This place is mine, not just legally, energetically, spiritually. I stood in the hallway and looked at the walls, clean now, but still echoing with every silent betrayal I'd scrubbed away. Then I hung the framed deed, not out of pride, out of remembrance, the kind that doesn't let you forget how close they came to erasing you. The indictment went public the next week. Local media ran the story under a headline that made me pause: Army vet wins inheritance fraud case, sister faces felony charges. People started reaching out, some from high school, some from the Army, some I hadn't spoken to in years. Every message echoed the same thing: I had no idea. That's the part that always stings, not that it happened, but that no one ever suspects. The ones who smile the sweetest. Danielle had always been the good one. The cheerleader. The volunteer. The girl who brought cupcakes to office birthdays, and I was the one with dirt on my boots. The one who didn't come home for holidays. The one who kept to herself. Until I didn't, until I fought back. And Now, their image of her was shattering just like mine once did, but I didn't respond to the messages, not out of bitterness, out of preservation, because this was the part where the world tries to rewrite the story. In hindsight, we always wondered, they'll say. She was never quite right, they'll murmur, but where were they when she signed my name on the deed? Where were they when I came back from work to find my mother's house scrubbed from my life? Rewriting the past is easy when you never paid attention to it in the first place. So I stayed quiet, let the facts speak, let the articles trend, let her face be the one associated with fraud. Not mine. Marcus called with updates from the DA. She's looking at a plea deal. 2 years probation. Full restitution. Public apology. I nodded. She won't mean it. Doesn't matter, he said. It'll be on record. That was what I cared about now, records. Truths that couldn't be erased with charm or crocodile tears. That she'd live in the shadow of what she did, no matter how many Instagram captions she wrote pretending otherwise. Later that week, I received a formal request for victim impact input. A statement to be read at sentencing. It asked how Danielle's actions affected my life, my mental health, my financial stability. I sat with the document for hours, started and deleted 10 drafts, then finally, I wrote, she didn't just sell a house. She tried to sell the last piece of my mother. The only place I felt safe after burying her. And she did it while I was deployed. Not because she needed to, but because she thought I wouldn't come back to stop her. I don't need her apology. I just need her name attached to what she did, forever. I printed it, signed it, mailed it. No flair. No emotion, just fact, because. At the end of all of this, what mattered most wasn't rage. It was that her lies finally had a home they couldn't escape from, the public record, and me? I had mine too, with a clean title, a blooming lilac, and a silence that didn't hide anymore. It ruled. Danielle took the deal. 2 years probation, $172,000 in restitution, mandatory community service. A public apology read into court record. She stood stiffly in front of the judge, flanked by her attorney. Her voice shook as she read from the paper. To my sister, Eliza. I apologize for my actions, for forging documents, and for betraying your trust. What I did was wrong. I have no excuse. She glanced at me once. I didn't blink, because it wasn't regret on her face. It was humiliation. Not over what she did, over being caught. She finished the statement and sat down like a girl who just failed her recital. The judge accepted the plea, the gavel fell, and just like that, it was official. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Marcus caught up with me on the steps. She'll never forget this, he said. I don't want her to forget, I replied. I want her to remember why it happened. We didn't shake hands. We nodded, the kind of nod soldiers give one another when words don't quite cut it. That night, the check arrived, full restitution. No signature, just bank paper. I deposited it, then immediately wrote a check for 10% to the Women's Veterans Legal Fund, not because I wanted to feel noble, because I knew how many of us live with this kind of betrayal, and never speak. If my story could light a match in someone else's dark corner, it would be worth something more than money. Weeks passed, the house grew quieter, the lilac bush thickened. I painted the bedroom in the color my mother always loved, but never used, soft gray-green, like eucalyptus leaves. I wasn't decorating, I was reclaiming room by room, memory by memory, without rage. Without pity, just still, sharp ownership. One morning, I got a letter typed to from Danielle. I know you'll never forgive me. I wouldn't either. But I'm trying to learn from this. I'm going to therapy. I've lost friends. I've lost work. I've lost you. And I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I folded the letter in half, placed it in a file labeled Evidence, Closed. Not as closure, but as confirmation that even when they don't bleed, your silence can still cut deep. A few days later, a neighbor stopped me as I watered the front porch plants. I read about your case, she said gently. Takes a lot of strength to do what you did. I nodded. It's not strength, I replied. It's just clarity with a deadline. We laughed. Then fell into quiet, and I realized something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need Danielle to suffer. I just needed the world, and her, to finally see who she really was, and they did. That was enough. It was strange. The first holiday without her, Danielle used to be the one who sent out the family group texts, who decorated first, who who posted the perfect Instagram table. Now, nothing and no messages. No photos, just silence, but it didn't feel empty. It felt clean, like the space left behind after a storm clears the rot. I didn't host a holiday dinner that year. I made soup, lit a fire, read a book, and for the first time in over a decade, I didn't feel like I owed anyone my presence. That's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. You don't just lose a person, you lose a version of yourself, the one who kept trying, kept accommodating, kept folding your edges inward to make room for people who never intended to meet you halfway. And when you bury that version, you don't need a funeral, you just stop answering the door. In January, I received a call from a podcast producer. They wanted me to tell my story. I said no, I wasn't interested in clicks. This story wasn't entertainment. It was surgery, messy, quiet, intimate, not meant for applause, meant for healing. But I offered them something else. I connected them to the veteran legal clinic, told them to interview the attorney who helped 10 other women through similar cases, because this wasn't just my story. It was a pattern. Point 1 of silence. Exploitation. Family betrayal. Legal erasure. The producer agreed, and 2 months later, the podcast went live, not about me, but about the system, the cracks Danielle slipped through, the way no one checked the notary's ethics, the way a woman's service didn't shield her from being stripped clean while she was halfway around the world defending other people's freedoms. It went viral, and still, Danielle never contacted me. No new apology, no final plea, just absence, and I liked it that way, because absence is different from abandonment. Abandonment leaves you scrambling for answers. Absence? That's a door you chose to close, and lock, and reinforce with steel. I started sleeping better, not just because the trial was over, but because I knew the story could no longer be rewritten, not by her, not by my father, not by anyone who once tried to shame me into silence with words like family and forgiveness. The truth was filed, published, searchable. It had a court record, a case number, a resolution. Danielle still lived in the city. I knew that, but we'd never cross paths again, not because I was avoiding her, because I didn't live in the same world anymore. Mine had walls built of integrity, hers, smoke and mirrors, finally shattered. Spring came early, the lilac bush bloomed. I took a photo of it, not to post, not to share, just to remember what growth looked like after the ground had been ripped open. Point 1 morning, I got an email from a local law student. She said she'd read the public case file for a class and wanted to thank me, not for winning, for not settling. Most people would have taken the money, she wrote. You waited for the truth. That mattered more than the headlines. I didn't respond, but didn't need to, because the point wasn't to be a role model. It was to be real in a world that rewards fake apologies and polished lies. Danielle had once asked me, in a text I never answered, if I thought she was evil. No, she wasn't evil, just entitled, and that's worse in some ways, because entitlement hides behind good intentions and birthday smiles. It smiles in courtrooms. It wears heels and fake humility, and then it signs your name on a deed while you're dodging mortars overseas. Evil is loud, but betrayal? It whispers. In April, I filed paperwork to open a scholarship fund at the local community college. It was small, just enough to help one student per year. Requirements were simple: must be a woman veteran, must be studying law, must write an essay on a time she chose to speak up when it was easier to stay silent. I named it the EWB Integrity Grant. Not for attention, for repair. Because when you claw something back from the fire, you don't just protect it, you build with it. Marcus called a few days later. Danielle had completed her first month of community service. She was working at a local shelter, folding blankets, logging hours. She's quiet, he said. Keeps her head down. Good, let her learn how it feels to be invisible without power. Let her learn how not all damage leaves bruises, some of it shows up in your tax records, your property files, your Google search history. We hung up. I went for a walk through the neighborhood. A few people waved. One woman crossed the street to say hello. She'd seen the podcast, read the article, wanted to thank me for being the quiet kind of strong. I smiled, but I didn't linger, because the truth is, I didn't want to be known for surviving her. I wanted to be known for outlasting her lies, and I had quietly, completely, without screaming, without crumbling. I had become undeniable. The last thing I restored was the banister, the one with the dent from prom night. When I tripped coming down in heels too high and hopes too heavy, I sanded the wood myself, not to erase the dent, to preserve it, because not every scar needs covering, some deserve to be left as they are, proof that something real happened there, something Worth remembering, Danielle was serving her probation quietly. She'd stayed out of headlines, out of social media, out of my life, but I knew she was watching. A few mutual acquaintances had mentioned it in passing. She asked about you, they'd say carefully, I'd nod, but I never asked what she said. Because I didn't need to translate her regret anymore. I wasn't trying to win, I had already ended it, and that's something people often misunderstand. Revenge isn't always about destruction, sometimes it's about deprivation, about making sure they never get what they really want from you again: access, control, explanation. And most of all, the right to rewrite what they did. That's what I'd taken back. She could cry, she could post vague spiritual quotes, she could talk about healing journeys. But the record wouldn't change. The deed was mine, the funds were returned. The charges were filed, the silence was finally on my terms. That was the real sentence, not the probation, the permanent clarity. A few months later, I found one last box in the basement. Inside were Christmas ornaments from when Danielle and I were kids. One was a clay star she'd made me in 3rd grade. It was cracked. I held it for a moment, then wrapped it in tissue and placed it gently back in the box. Not everything needed to be thrown away. Some things just needed to stay separate, not displayed, not denied, just acknowledged. That's what healing had become for me: not forgetting, not forgiving, organizing the wreckage, choosing what stays on the shelf and what stays in the dark. Later that week, I submitted a short essay for the community college newsletter. They'd asked each scholarship sponsor to explain why they created their fund. I kept it short, because no woman who serves her country should return home and have to fight again, just to keep what was already hers. It printed next to a photo of me in the yard, next to the lilac bush. They didn't Photoshop anything. The dirt under my nails stayed in the image, and I was glad, because healing isn't neat, it's gritty. The court officially closed the case in August. Danielle had completed her first half of community service. Her probation was quiet, uneventful. No new infractions, no appeals, and, according to Marcus, no more contact attempts. She's gone full ghost, he said. Radio silence. Good, I said. Let her haunt herself. Because I wasn't looking for resolution anymore. I was looking for completion. There's a difference. Resolution implies mutual understanding, completion means it's done, with or without them. The last step came unexpectedly. I was at the DMV, renewing my license, when the clerk looked up and said, "Oh, you're the woman from that property fraud case." My spine stiffened. She smiled kindly. "My sister tried to steal my grandma's estate. I read about your case. It helped me file. Just, thank you." I nodded, and for once, I didn't feel exposed. I felt useful. There was no fame in it, just a ripple. One that made someone else stronger. I walked out with a renewed license and a reminder that Danielle's story didn't erase mine. It revealed it. Later that week, I finally opened the drawer that held her last letter, the one I'd placed under evidence, closed. I read it again, the line that stuck this time: "I didn't think you'd come after me like this." It wasn't regret. It was surprise, because for all the years we grew up together, she never really saw me, not as someone capable of war. Not even when I wore the uniform. To her, I was just the older sister who left. The soldier. The silence. The placeholder. So, she underestimated me, and that's what finally broke her. Not my anger, not the court system, not even the money, the miscalculation. That I'd stay quiet forever. I stood up from the kitchen table, walked to the fireplace, and dropped her letter into the flame, watched it curl, blacken, disappear. Not as revenge, not as release, as confirmation that the story was over, that she no longer lived here, not in this house, not in my mind. She didn't just lose the case, she lost the narrative, and I had reclaimed it, word by word, deed by deed, silence by silence. When the flame died out, I closed the fireplace screen and turned off the lights. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt accurate. And that, in the end, is the sharpest justice. That it's been a year since I reclaimed the house. No new drama. No more letters. No more calls. Danielle exists now only in public record and memory, both of which I've let sit quietly, like old photo albums I don't need to open. People still ask if I've spoken to her. I haven't, and I won't, because this wasn't a fight between sisters. It was a theft. A violation, and I responded with the only tools that meant anything in the world we live in: proof, law, precision. There's a strange kind of peace that follows the end of a long war, not joy, not celebration, just a calibrated stillness, like a room where the furniture has finally been put back where it belongs. I live simply now. I grow herbs in the kitchen window. I volunteer with the veteran legal clinic twice a month. I water the lilac bush every Sunday. I built a new bookshelf from scratch. Refinished the floors in the hallway. Painted the front door navy. People say the house looks brand new. It's not. It's reclaimed, every inch of it, and not just in name in energy in meaning. I don't tell the full story. Often it's not the kind of tale you spill over wine or brunch, it's the kind you hold in your bones. Quiet. Cold. Etched, because it reminds you who you are when no one is watching. And who they become when they think you won't fight. One afternoon, I passed Danielle in town. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and just kept walking. Good, that's how ghosts behave when the house is no longer theirs. I didn't feel anything. Not hatred. Not pity, just distance. A perfect, deliberate, final distance, because in the end, I didn't have to destroy her, I just had to make sure she couldn't erase me. Now, here comes the emotional conclusion. I used to think the worst part of betrayal was the moment it happened. But it's not, it's what follows, the silence, the gaslighting, the way people twist your pain into a drama, the moment you speak it aloud. It wasn't just my inheritance they tried to steal. It was my credibility, my sanity, my right to be angry. But I learned something in the aftermath. You don't need to scream to take up space, you don't need to be loud to be dangerous, all you need is truth, proof, and the will to walk through every door they swore you'd never open. They counted on my silence. On my training to endure, not confront. On my belief that keeping peace was more important than protecting myself. They were wrong, because what they didn't see, what they never tried to understand, is that a woman who has already survived war doesn't flinch when her own family turns on her. She calculates, she documents, she rebuilds, not because she wants revenge, because she refuses to let the story end with a lie, and in the end, that's what this was about. Not a house, not even justice, control, reclaiming it. Redefining it, refusing to let them edit the past or dictate the future. I don't miss Danielle, I don't hate her, I don't forgive her either. Some people don't deserve to be carried into the next chapter, they deserve to be written out, and I did it the only way I knew how, quietly, sharply, with the kind of precision that doesn't draw blood, but leaves a scar no apology can reach. She tried to bury me with a signature, I resurrected with a verdict.